and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, Cover us. For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Two others also, who were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. Luke 23:26-34. New Revised Standard Version. The end of Luke's narration of the crucifixion is at the very beginning of this chapter. John's account. In John's account, Pilate tried to release Jesus, but the Jews insisted that he be crucified. Then delivered he him therefore unto them to be crucified. And they took Jesus, and led him away. And he bearing his cross went forth into a place called the place of a skull, which is called in the Hebrew Golgotha. Where they crucified him, and two other with him, on either side one, the crucifixion, 151 and Jesus in the midst. And Pilate wrote a title, and put it on the cross. And the writing was Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. John 19:16-19. King James Version. John's report of the events immediately preceding the crucifixion has Jesus carrying the cross himself. The inscription on the cross is different here from that in the other Gospels. And John has many details that are quite different from the other narrations. Thus there are many discrepancies among the narrations of Jesus' death. From the Bible alone it is impossible to know what really happened at that time. Some of these discrepancies can be understood by the fact that Jesus' contemporaries had different understandings of his death. Willie Markson clearly points this out. See Jesus and Easter, Abingdon Press, 1990, pp. 54-55. It cannot be disputed that different circles in early Christianity held to different understandings of the death of Jesus. In the mate real of the synoptic tradition there is the thought that the death of Jesus was a consequence of his activity. Jesus is portrayed there as one who by his activities risked persecution, and even death. He is not, however, portrayed as one who had wanted his own death, or even as one who had understood it as a vicarious or atoning death. The idea of the death of Jesus as an atonement is foreign to the material of the synoptic tradition, although it was later inserted at two places, Mark 10:45 and 14:24. Rather, Jesus dies because he hazarded death in the way he carried on his activity. In the formulas and especially in Paul's letters, the understanding of Jesus' death as an atonement is evident. Historically and theologically this idea has been of greater significance, yet it is only one understanding of the death of Jesus. The fact remains that from the Bible alone we cannot get a clear picture of what actually happened. 152. Development of the Christian doctrine. Quran's account. The account of Jesus' death in the Quran is startling. It states, "They never killed Jesus, they never crucified him, they were only made to think that they did," as quoted below with emphasis added. They claimed that they killed the Messiah, Jesus, the Son of Mary, the messenger of God. In fact, they never killed him, they never crucified him, they were only made to think that they did. Indeed, those who speculate about him are full of doubt about their own accounts. They are never sure. They only conjecture. What is absolutely certain is, they never killed him. Instead, God raised him to him. God is Almighty, most wise. Quran 4:157-158. This is rather foreign and strange sounding to most Christians, so let me try and share the explanation given to me by Dr. Rashad Khalifa, Quranic scholar and translator. The Quran consistently talks about the real person, i.e. the soul, when talking about anyone. Thus the Quran differentiates between two human entities: a temporary entity, the body, and an eternal entity which is the person. The temporary entity is considered a shell or a garment worn by the lasting entity. The Quran does not regard this temporary shell as the person. The importance of the body, or the person's outer shell, is in serving the real person by effecting sufficient growth and development of the soul in preparation for the real, eternal life of the hereafter. If we look upon one's body as a wild horse, one attains the required growth and development by taming and controlling the whims of this horse. At the end of one's predetermined interim in this life, one sheds the shell and moves on towards the eternal hereafter. The body's role ends. The crucifixion. 153. Thus, when the Quran states that they never crucified Jesus, they never killed him, the word him here refers to the real Jesus, not his body. This understanding matches quite well with what Matthew tells us that Jesus told his disciples. Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Matthew 10:28. New Revised Standard Version. Ultimately, nothing and no one, other than ourselves and God, can affect our essence, our soul. It is the soul that is important. It truly is the soul that is the person, not the body. The body may be present somewhere, but the person may or may not be present with it. People who are familiar with out-of-body experiences recognize the body as nothing more than a garment or a physical vehicle for the soul. In out-of-body experiences, the intellect remains with the person, not with the body. Those who practice out-of-body or astral projection experiments often describe the body as just laying there like an inanimate object. The Quran thus explains that Jesus, the real person, was raised to God prior to any torture or crucifixion. Those who believed that they were torturing or crucifying Jesus were in fact dealing with Jesus's body, an empty shell devoid of feelings and knowledge. He was gone long before any torture or crucifixion of his body. They plotted and schemed, but so did God. God is the best schemer. Thus, God said, "O Jesus, I am putting you to death, raising you to me, and ridding you of the disbelievers." 154. Development of the Christian doctrine. I will make those who follow you high above those who disbelieve until the day of resurrection. Then to me is the ultimate destiny of all of you. Then I will judge among you concerning your disputes. Quran 3:54-55. It is astonishing to find this phenomenon, the separation of the real person from the still living body, indicated in the New Testament, and even more specifically stated in some apocryphal literature. There is an especially straightforward reference to this phenomenon reported by James Brashler in the Nag Hammadi Library, Harper and Row, 1977. The Nag Hammadi Library is a collection of ancient documents unearthed at Nag Hammadi, Egypt. They are described as containing the sacred scriptures of the Gnostic movement that emerged and rapidly grew in the cradle of civilization at the time of Jesus and early Christianity. Its codices are a priceless periscope into the tumultuous world of ideas brewing during one of civilization's great turning points. James Brashler describes a vision seen by the Apostle Peter, in his introduction to the Gnostic Apocalypse of Peter Ibid, p. 339. The first visionary scene is depicting the hostile priests and people about to kill Jesus 72, 4-9. The second scene 81, 3-14 describes Peter's vision of the crucifixion of Jesus. The accompanying interpretation by Jesus makes a distinction between the external physical form and the living Jesus. The latter stands nearby laughing at his ignorant persecutors. A clear distinction is thus made in this